Welcome to Subramani. In case you're wondering why this change of attire and change of location, it's because I'm on a vacation and I thought if I'm on a vacation, I should do a post about vacation, right? So I'm in Tadoba and we were going to be here for 3 days. Yesterday was the first day and it's an amazing place. It's in Maharashtra, but it's a huge influence of Madhya Pradesh. The language here is more Hindi than Marathi. It's a tiger reserve, and this is perhaps my fifth trip to Tadoba. And it is one of those joints where you can come, but you can't really put it on Facebook because you won't get the likes that you get when you go to Bangkok or anything abroad, right? If you have used your passport, it is supposed to be a better vacation. Does not hold true for me because I'll post something about being in Kaziranga. I was in Kaziranga the previous month, and the previous month to that, I was in a beach called Divegar, which is not very far away from Mumbai. Now, I wouldn't say all of this is out of the way kind of place, but these are not places which normally people go. People prefer vacations to Switzerland and Paris, and though I have nothing against them, I think you can see them at a much older age also. But maybe younger people should travel a lot more within India. That set me thinking on one aspect that younger people are traveling and traveling like mad. There's no doubt about that. Like a friend of mine who was the head of HR of a big BFSI company said, all of us sitting in cabins agonize over going on a vacation. And then, after great difficulty, we decide to go for a 3 day trip to Goa. But the younger people sitting outside the cabin will be standing together, and when I walk up to them and say, "What are you doing?" they'll be planning for a vacation to Ireland or Spain or things like that. These kids travel a lot more and they travel to more esoteric and exotic places. That's true, perhaps, that the younger generation is far more adventurous in traveling than our generation. But in our generation also, I have friends who travel to really esoteric locations. They might even go to temples, but they would still go to a lot of esoteric places also. That brings us to a very important thing. Should you be borrowing money to go on a vacation? And is it okay to borrow? I have no great views on whether you should borrow. But largely, I feel that borrowing is something which you should do only to buy an asset, not just for vacations and things like that. But be that as it may, some people would think, oh, I don't have current liquidity, but I don't want to touch my mutual funds or anything else for going on a vacation, so I have assets but will borrow. To me, that does not make any sense because whenever you are borrowing, you have to understand that the rate at which you take personal loans, etc., it's very difficult for equity to match that. Yes, March 2020 to December to February 2021 has been very different. If it would have made a lot of sense for you to borrow and travel rather than remove your money from mutual funds. Having said that, that is not always true and that does not always make sense because for expenses, borrowing does not make sense, especially if you have money. But what happens to those people who are borrowing because they don't have money? They want to go on a vacation, but they don't have money to go on a vacation. What should such people do? Such people should be very careful. You should be borrowing the minimum that you should be borrowing. Suppose you're going to spend 1 lakh on a vacation, which is pretty high a number. Especially if you're going to take a domestic vacation, you really don't spend that kind of money. You don't need to spend that kind of money for a single person. Yes, if you're a family, it is possible that you go for a longish 5 day, 6 day kind of a trip. You might end up spending something like that, but it is very unlikely that a single individual who is borrowing would spend that kind of money, because even assuming that you go by air, but you don't stay in the most expensive of places, right? I'm currently staying here at MTDC Tadoba, and it's not expensive at all. This whole vacation is not costing me more than about 20,000 rupees, maybe 25 at the outset for 4 5 days. That's not very high, right? And this includes the rides of going into the forest, 5 6 rides, stay, and does not include food. So maybe including food, not more than 30,000 rupees. Now, these are not expensive vacations. These are neither nor are these cheap vacations. You can go to a beach resort like Divigar, or even I would suggest Puri, where it could be much cheaper to do the beaches, or you could go to places like Mathiran, which is a mountain, where it does not cost even this much, right? It is much cheaper because the only cost that you will incur is stay and food. And if you must borrow, please take everything into account. You are borrowing, the interest that you will pay, and all those things also you have to take into account while repaying. Because if you borrow 1 lakh, you may end up repaying 1 lakh 18 or 1 lakh 25,000, depending on how quickly you repay. In fact, if you repay over 3 years, you may end up paying at least 1.5 lakhs to 1.7 lakhs as an EMI. So be careful about that as to how much you are borrowing and whether you can just postpone it by some time. My suggestion is very simple. Create one fun fund. Keep doing SIPs in that, and whenever you want to take a vacation, see how well that fun fund is doing. Now, suppose you have decided that you and your spouse, let us assume you are a young 34-year-old couple, you don't have children as yet, and you are going on a vacation to Europe. It shouldn't cost you more than say 5 6 lakhs. So create this fund. Whenever you have a surplus, keep putting money into that fund. So instead of borrowing, you create your own fund. And after some time, look at how much money is there in the fund. Suppose you need 6 lakhs for this vacation and you have 5 lakh 45 or 5 lakh 50, and the market is booming, market is doing very well. Market is at 53,000 index, and you are happy with what has happened to your fund. Your contribution was only 2.5 lakhs or 3 lakhs, and this is what has happened to your fund. Then it makes sense to borrow. Go ahead, borrow 50,000 rupees and go on that vacation, because you're just bridging the gap. Don't borrow 6 lakhs to be repaid on EMI to go on a vacation. That seems to be very cruel. But taking this 50,000 rupee loan is not too bad, because on a reasonable CTC you will be able to repay this very quickly, or liquidate some other mutual fund also, and you have 6 lakhs, go on a vacation. I wouldn't mind borrowing 50,000 rupees for a couple who has put together 5 lakh 50. I'm not saying you deserve it, but it is okay. Or try to cut down your expenses, and that is also possible. If you talk to a sensible travel agent, now I don't tell me that this is not the best way to do it. I think if you know a good travel agent, he more than justifies his fees, right? His or her fees. There are a lot of women in this profession. So check out. It is not always that you go to a Make My Trip or Ease My Trip and you will be able to plan your vacations and you get the best rates. Actually, you don't. In the recent trip to Kaziranga, I used Make My Trip to find transport costs, and then afterwards I spoke to one person in Kaziranga. He had to make arrangements for the trips going in, and I said, "Arey, if you have vehicles going into the forest, would you have a vehicle to pick me up also?" So he said yes, and we were three of us to be picked up. He did the whole thing, and we got the best deal. The deal was better than what was being offered to us on Make My Trip or Ease My Trip, or there was no taxi service available which was cheaper than this. Good vehicle, good driver, known person, all these helps. So don't always think that talking to somebody will increase your cost. It does not. But Make My Trip and all of them give you some kind of a ballpark indicative figure as to how much it is. After that, try to do some more shopping, boss. Ultimately, we are Indians, right? So, ye dil mange more. So, given the amount of money that we want to spend, we want to make the money go longer, right? So, do that. It's decent to take a vacation. Don't borrow always for a vacation, but still borrow for a small gap. Take all costs into account, or cost of staying, if you want baggage insurance, if you're traveling to places where there is a little more danger, you may want to increase your health insurance. Check out your travel insurance. Check out all this. I'm not saying I've never taken travel insurance, but just check out what is necessary. See what happens. If baggage loss is going to impact you, what is the impact? Check all that. Go on a vacation. Bon voyage.